Chapter 1. The Gates of Ashwood. The scent hit her before the gates did, pine bark and wet granite, the particular mineral tang of Ashwood soil after rain. Elara Voss had forgotten how specific a place could smell until her body remembered it for her, some animal part of her spine straightening before her mind caught up. Territory line, about 200 yards out, Draven said beside her, scanning the tree line with the flat attention of a man who trusted nothing until he'd counted it twice. Sentries already made us, 3 positions badly spaced. Sloppy, Elara said, and made herself focus on that word instead of the ache blooming low in her chest. Behind them, 12 Silver Guard riders held formation, silver-threaded cloaks catching the gray afternoon light. The Lycan Accord didn't send small delegations to failing packs. It sent statements. The gate itself hadn't changed. 2 carved oak pillars, a wolf's head worked into each, weathered now, one ear chipped off the left pillar since she'd last stood here. She remembered standing beneath that same chipped ear 5 years ago in a white ceremonial dress, waiting for a mating vow that never came. Roan was already there when the gate opened. He looked wrong. Not older exactly, wolves didn't age like that, but thinner in a way that had nothing to do with muscle, his eyes ringed with the kind of exhaustion that sleep couldn't touch. His wolf sat just under his skin, restless, visible in the faint amber flicker at the edges of his irises. "Commander Locke," Roan said, deliberately not looking at her. "The Accord's welcome to inspect the border. My pack doesn't require a permanent garrison." "That's not your call to make, Alpha Ashcombe." Draven's voice stayed level, unhurried. "The Council's directive is signed. You've had 3 raids in 6 weeks and no explanation for how Nightshade keeps finding your weak points." "I've handled worse." "You've handled nothing," Draven said. "That's rather the point." Elara watched Roan's jaw work, watched the old reflex surface, the alpha who didn't kneel, who didn't yield ground, not to Council, not to anyone. 5 years ago, that same stubbornness had stood in front of his entire pack and told her she wasn't fit to be his Luna. She'd heard the words in her sleep for a year afterward. "You will render courtesy to the ranking officer," Draven said, and something in his tone shifted, not louder, just colder. "Commander Voss holds Accord authority equal to a sitting alpha. Bow to your former Luna." The words landed like a dropped stone into still water. Roan's eyes finally found hers. For one unguarded second, she saw something raw move through them. Shame, maybe, or grief. She couldn't tell which, and hated that she wanted to know. Then his knees hit the dirt. The pack behind him went utterly silent. Somewhere a child made a small, startled sound and was hushed. Elara felt no satisfaction in it, none of the vindication she might have imagined once, lying awake in Accord barracks nursing the wound he'd left. She felt instead a strange, unwelcome pull low in her sternum, an old thread pulling taut. Not now, she told the feeling, not ever again. "Rise," she said, and her voice came out steadier than she felt. "This isn't about old business, Alpha Ashcombe. We're here to assess Ashwood's defenses against Nightshade incursion, nothing more." He rose slowly, dirt on his knees, and looked at her the way a man looks at a door he'd assumed was locked forever. "Elara." "Commander Voss," she corrected. Something in his face closed like a fist. "Commander Voss," he repeated, and turned to lead them through the gate, his shoulders set in the particular way of a man carrying more weight than anyone around him understood. Elara followed, counting her own breaths, refusing to let her hand drift to the old mark at her collarbone, the place where a claiming should have been and never was. Chapter 2. Silver and Ash. They set up command in the old guest hall, and Elara's stomach turned the moment she recognized the carved beams overhead. This was the room. 5 years ago, they draped it in white ribbon and mating flowers for a ceremony that ended in humiliation instead of vows. Now it held maps pinned with iron tacks, a council seal stamped fresh on the door. "Livestock slaughtered in 3 separate pastures, always at the new moon," Beta Alistair Finch was saying, tracing the border on the map with a blunt finger. He was a broad, weathered man with a permanent crease between his brows, the look of someone who'd spent years cleaning up messes he hadn't made. 2 scouts missing entirely, No bodies, no blood trail. That's not opportunistic raiding, Commander. That's reconnaissance. Someone's mapping your patrol gaps, Draven said. We've noticed, Alistair's mouth twisted. We just haven't found how. Elara studied the pattern of pins, then studied the pack itself, thinner faces than she remembered, a nervous flinch running through a cluster of young wolves when a door slammed somewhere down the hall. Fear had settled into Ashwood's bones the way damp settles into old wood. The door opened again, softer this time, and a woman stepped in with the unhurried grace of someone accustomed to being watched. Dark hair pinned severe and precise, eyes that assessed Elara from boots to collar in a single sweep. Ivy Sable, she said, extending a hand Elara didn't particularly want to take. Roan, intended. Commander Voss, Elara kept her voice smooth. Accord liaison. I know who you are. Ivy's smile didn't reach her eyes. The whole pack remembers who you are. Tell me, does it sting less the second time, coming back somewhere you weren't wanted? Ivy, Alistair said, a warning low in his throat. I'm only being honest. Ivy's gaze slid to Draven, cataloging him too, filing him away for later use. We should all be honest here, shouldn't we, given the stakes? She left before anyone could answer, the door clicking shut with more precision than force. Myra Callan appeared at Elara's elbow moments later, arms crossed, dark eyes sharp with concern rather than curiosity. You're doing that thing, she said quietly. What thing? The thing where your hands go still because you won't let them shake. Myra had served under Elara for 3 years. She'd learned to read the smaller tells. You don't have to prove anything here. I'm fine. You're standing in the room where he broke you and telling me you're fine. Elara didn't answer that. She busied herself instead with the map, tracing the border line Alistair had marked, letting the silence do the talking her mouth wouldn't. That night in the small room assigned to her, she caught Roan's scent drifting faint through a cracked window, pine and something warmer underneath, something her body had never managed to forget no matter how far she'd run from it. She pressed her palm flat against the cold windowsill and made herself breathe evenly until the ache dulled to something manageable. In the doorway across the hall, unseen, Draven watched her shadow move behind the thin curtain and said nothing at all about the things he'd already guessed. Chapter 3, What the Pack Doesn't Know. The truth came in pieces, the way truth usually did, not delivered whole, but leaking through cracks nobody meant to leave open. Your father never smuggled anything, Alistair said one evening, more to his ale than to Elara, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Everyone here knew it. Roan knew it too, eventually. Too late to matter. Elara set down her cup carefully. What do you mean, everyone knew it? Alistair's jaw tightened, the crease between his brows deepening. The council needed a reason to push Ashwood into an alliance with the Dragwire line. Your father made a convenient villain. Roan believed the evidence because believing it meant he didn't have to fight the council for you. He met her eyes then, something apologetic in the look. I'm not defending him. I'm just saying it wasn't the simple story you were told. She didn't sleep that night. She lay staring at the ceiling beams, turning the words over like stones, looking for the sharp edge that would let her hate him cleanly again. It wouldn't come. The scouting party crossed the border at dawn. Elara caught the scent first, unfamiliar musk, sharp with aggression, 3 wolves moving low and fast through the eastern tree line. She was moving before she finished the thought, silver blade already in hand, calling formation to the guard with 2 sharp words. The fight was brief and brutal. She dropped the lead scout with a strike that would have looked, to anyone watching, like something she'd been born knowing rather than something she'd bled to learn. Draven fought at her flank without needing instruction, the 2 of them moving like a single organism, silver flashing, snarls cut short. From the ridge above, Roan watched. He hadn't meant to be caught by the sight of her. He told himself he was there to observe tactics, nothing more. But watching her disarm a wolf twice her size with brutal, economical grace, he felt something crack open in his chest that had nothing to do with strategy. She became this without me, he thought, and the thought tasted like ash. She'd been soft once, gentle-eyed, quick to laugh, easily startled by loud noises. He told himself that softness made her unfit to stand as Luna beside a war alpha, that the council was right to push him toward someone harder. He'd been wrong about nearly everything. He understood now, standing on a ridge watching the woman he'd rejected fight like she'd forgotten how to be afraid. When the last scout fled, Elara turned, chest heaving, blood not her own streaked along one forearm, and found him watching. Their eyes held. Whatever he felt in that moment, he didn't try to hide it fast enough. Guilt, plain and unmistakable, written across a face that used to be unreadable to her and had somehow become unreadable no longer. She looked away first, sheathing her blade, refusing to let the small victory of his shame feel like anything at all. Chapter 4. Old Wounds, New Orders. The Accord's directive was explicit: joint strategy sessions, twice weekly, Alpha and Commander coordinating directly. Elara had read the order 3 times, hoping the words might rearrange themselves into something less unbearable. They hadn't. Your patrol rotation leaves the northern ridge exposed for 40 minutes every shift change, she said, tapping the map. That's a gap Nightshade could drive a herd through. We've held that ridge for 6 generations. Roan's voice had an edge she remembered too well, the reflexive defensiveness of a man who confused correction with attack. And now you're losing scouts along it. Those 2 facts aren't unrelated. You've been here 4 days. I don't need 4 years to count a gap in your rotation, Roan. His name slipped out before she caught it, and something flickered across his face, not quite hope, something more fragile and complicated than that. She hated that she'd noticed. You used to trust my judgment, he said, quieter. I used to trust a lot of things. She didn't look up from the map. That was before. He was close enough now that she could feel the low thrum of his wolf packing beneath his skin, restless, drawn toward her scent in a way his human half clearly fought against. She felt her own pulse betray her, quickening despite every instruction she gave it not to. I never stopped, he started. Don't. He stopped. Down the hall, in the makeshift quarters given to the guard, Myra found Alistair hunched over patrol logs, muttering about missing pages. You always do that, she said, leaning in the doorway. Do what? Talk to paperwork like it owes you money. A reluctant smile tugged at his mouth. Half your guard doesn't file half as thoroughly as we do. I've got opinions about that. I've got opinions about your face, she said, and immediately wished she hadn't, though the way his ears reddened made it worth the risk. Elsewhere, Ivy moved through the pack halls collecting small, careful conversations like a woman gathering kindling. To the council liaison's runner, she mentioned, so casually, so concerned, that the commander seemed rather more invested in Ashwood than protocol required. That perhaps old feelings clouded professional judgment. That perhaps this wasn't protection at all, but a woman circling back for revenge dressed up as duty. Thessaly Marrow arrived that evening, an elder whose presence made the whole hall quieter, her silver-streaked hair pulled back severe, her gaze missing nothing. The council sent me to observe, she said simply, and something about the way she said it made clear the observation cut both directions. That night alone, Roan forced himself into a partial shift on the training grounds, an old exercise meant to steady a restless wolf. Halfway through the change, his muscles locked, agony tearing through his shoulders as the shift refused to complete, refused to reverse, leaving him half man, half wolf, howling low and broken into the dark. Chapter 5. The Fatting. Elara saw it from the tree line before she understood what she was seeing. Roan on his knees in the training yard, body twisted between forms, fur patched unevenly across skin that should have been whole either way, a sound coming out of him that wasn't quite human and wasn't quite wolf. She was running before she decided to run. Roan. He flinched at his own name, teeth bared involuntarily, eyes flickering amber to amber in rapid, sickening succession. Stay back, he ground out. Please don't watch this. She didn't listen. She'd never been good at listening to him when it mattered least. Thessaly arrived within the hour, summoned by Alistair's frantic knock, and her examination was brisk, clinical, and utterly without comfort. The fatting, she said afterward in the guest hall with Elara standing rigid by the door. Rejecting a true bond doesn't sever it cleanly. It corrodes the wolf slowly from the inside. He's deep in it. Months, perhaps, not years. Months until what? Until the wolf disappears entirely. Thessaly's eyes were steady, unflinching. And when the wolf goes, the man doesn't survive it either. Elara felt something crack behind her ribs, some carefully built wall giving way despite every effort she'd made to keep it standing. She hated him. She, built 5 years on hating him cleanly, and now that clean hatred was dissolving into something far more complicated and far less bearable. There's a way to stop it, Thessaly added, but it isn't mine to offer, it's yours. She left the words hanging and left the room, and Elara stood alone with them for a long, silent minute. Draven found her an hour later on the ramparts, staring out at nothing. "You don't have to fix this," he said. "I know. I mean it, Elara." He came to stand beside her, close but not touching, his voice rougher than usual. "I've watched you carry this pack's problems and this man's mistakes since the day we crossed that gate. You're allowed to let this one go." She turned to look at him properly. Something in his face made her chest ache differently than before. "Draven." "I care about you," he said before she could steer them away from it. "Beyond duty, I have for a while." He held up a hand before she could speak. "I'm not asking you to answer that tonight. I just needed you to know it before whatever happens next happens." She didn't answer. She couldn't, honestly, and the not knowing sat heavy in her chest as she watched him walk away. Below the ramparts, unseen, Ivy slipped through the tree line to a clearing where a tall, scarred wolf waited in human form, patient and amused. "Ashwood's Alpha is dying," she told Vex Dragwire, "and his commander doesn't know what she wants yet. Give me 2 weeks." Vex smiled, slow and satisfied. "You've earned your place at my side, Ivy Sable." Chapter 6, Choosing Sides. The council's answer, when it finally came, was no answer at all. The decision rests with Commander Voss. She read the message twice, then a third time, hopping for some hidden clause that would let her hand this weight to someone else. She found Roan in the empty training yard, sitting against the fence post where he'd collapsed 2 nights before, staring at nothing. "Tell me everything," she said. "All of it, not the version the pack knows." He looked up and for once didn't try to armor his face against her. "The council brought evidence against your father 3 weeks before our ceremony. Forged, I know that now. I didn't fight it. I told myself I was protecting Ashwood. The truth is I was scared of the council, of losing standing, of choosing you over everything I thought made me strong." His voice cracked slightly. "I chose the pack because choosing you felt like a risk I didn't have the courage to take. I've hated myself for it every day since. That's not an excuse. It's just the truth you asked for." She stood very still, absorbing it. It wasn't forgiveness, what moved through her. It was smaller than that, a crack rather than a collapse, but a crack nonetheless. "You let them destroy my father's name to save your own position." "Yes. And you're only telling me this now, because you're dying." "I'd have told you eventually," he said quietly. "The dying just took away my last excuse to keep hiding it." She turned away, needing distance to think. Behind her, unspoken, Draven's earlier confession sat unresolved, a weight she hadn't set down yet. She didn't know how to hold both truths at once. The man who'd hurt her healing into something almost recognizable again, and the man who'd never hurt her at all, waiting with open, patient hands. That evening Myra pulled Alistair aside near the armory. "Something's wrong with the patrol logs. Pages missing, dates that don't match the actual shift changes." "I've noticed the same." Alistair's face was grim. "I have a suspicion, no proof yet." "Ivy," Myra said, and it wasn't a question. He didn't confirm it aloud. He didn't need to. That night another raid struck, deeper into Ashwood territory than any before, hitting the eastern grain stores with precision that spoke of inside knowledge. 2 wolves wounded, supplies burned, and Elara stood over the damage feeling the last of her hesitation burn away with it. "I'll help stabilize him," she told Thessaly the next morning, jaw set. "Not for him, for the pack that doesn't deserve to fall because of his mistakes." Thessaly studied her for a long moment. Tell yourself whatever story helps you sleep, Commander. Just don't wait too long to admit the real one. Chapter 7, Cracks in the Wall. Myra found the token while searching Ivy's quarters for the missing patrol pages. A small carved pendant, black wolf's head, unmistakably Nightshade craftsmanship, tucked beneath a false floorboard with careful deliberation. She brought it straight to Alistair, who turned it over in his palm with the particular stillness of a man absorbing a betrayal he'd already half expected. "We can't move on this yet," he said finally. "Not with Nightshade mobilizing. If she panics and runs, we lose the chance to see how deep this goes. And if she does more damage before we're ready, then I'll live with that risk better than I'll live with starting a war inside these walls right before we fight one outside them." His jaw was tight, his voice tighter. "Watch her. Say nothing yet." Elsewhere on the eastern ridge, Roan and Elara walked a patrol line together in silence that had, somewhere in the last few days, stopped being hostile and started being simply quiet. "I owe you a real apology," he said eventually. "Not excuses dressed up as one, just I'm sorry for choosing fear over you, for letting you carry the weight of my cowardice for 5 years while I told myself I made the responsible choice." She didn't answer immediately. The wind carried his scent toward her, and beneath it, unmistakably, the old pull surfaced, not simple desire, but something deeper and more aching, a familiarity her body had never managed to unlearn no matter how far she'd traveled from it. "I'm not ready to say it's fine," she said finally. "I don't think it will ever be entirely fine." "I'm not asking for fine." His voice was rough. "I'm asking you to know I mean it." She didn't walk away. That in itself felt like something. Later, Draven watched them from across the training yard, close enough to see the shift in her posture. The way her guard had softened by degrees, she probably didn't even notice herself. He felt the ache of it land somewhere quiet in his chest, and made peace, slowly, with a truth he'd been circling for weeks. Her heart had never been entirely his to claim, no matter how gently he'd hoped otherwise. Thessaly found Elara alone that night. "If you intend to reclaim what's between you, it has to happen soon," she said, without preamble. "His condition is accelerating faster than I expected. Weeks, not months now." Before Elara could respond, a runner burst into the hall, breathless, face pale. "Nightshade forces spotted at the southern border. Numbers too large for a raid, Commander. This is an invasion." Chapter 8, The Breach. The attack came at dusk, exploiting the exact weak point in the eastern rotation that Elara had flagged days earlier. Proof, brutal and immediate, that someone inside Ashwood's walls had handed Vex Dragwire a map. "Ivy," Alistair snarled, catching sight of her slipping toward the medical den with unnatural calm amid the chaos, a signal flare half-raised in her hand. He tackled her before she could light it, the two of them crashing into the mud as Nightshade warriors poured through the breach behind them. Elara shifted for the first time in front of the pack, not the controlled partial change of training, but full transformation, bones rearranging in a blur of motion and pain, fur the color of wet slate rising along her spine. Her wolf was lean and vicious and precise, and she tore into the fighting beside Draven, the two of them moving as one unit, silver-edged claws flashing under a sky gone dark with smoke. Roan fought too, though every wolf watching could see the cost of it. His shift ragged, incomplete, his movements a half-beat slower than they should have been. He took a blow meant for a cluster of terrified pups sheltering near the collapsed fence, silver-forged steel raking deep across his ribs, and went down hard. "Roan!" Elara's voice cracked through the battlefield, human again in an instant, running toward him without thought for the danger still swarming around them. Draven covered her flank, cutting down a warrior who lunged for her exposed back, roaring something at the remaining guard to close ranks. The tide turned slowly, Ashwood wolves rallying around the sight of their alpha bleeding for children not his own, the Silver Guard's discipline cutting through Nightshade's numbers with brutal efficiency. By the time the last of Vex's warriors retreated into the trees, the yard was littered with wounded, the air thick with smoke and blood, and the ragged sound of survivors catching their breath. Elara knelt in the mud beside Roan, pressing both hands hard against the wound at his ribs, feeling his pulse flutter weak and irregular beneath her palms. "Stay with me," she said, voice breaking despite every effort to keep it steady. "Roan, stay with me." His eyes found hers, glassy, distant, his wolf barely a flicker beneath the surface now. "You came back," he murmured, as if it were the only thing that mattered in the world. "Even after everything, you came back." "Don't talk," she said. "Just breathe." Behind her, Alistair dragged Ivy upright, her wrists bound, her composure finally cracking as she realized how completely her betrayal had been exposed. Chapter 9, What's Left to Save. Ivy's judgment came swift and cold. The council liaison read the charges aloud before the assembled pack: collusion with Nightshade, treason against Ashwood, the token and the signal flare laid bare as evidence no defense could soften. Banishment, effective immediately, her name struck from pack record. She didn't look at anyone as they let her out. Elara found she didn't have the energy to feel triumph about it. There was too much else demanding her attention. Roan lay in the medical den, wound-bound but healing slower than it should, his skin fever-hot, his breathing shallow and irregular. Thessaly's face, when Elara found her outside the den, told her everything before the elder spoke a word. "The wound alone wouldn't kill him," Thessaly said. "But combined with the fatting, his body doesn't have the reserves to fight both. There's only one thing left that might tip the balance." She held Elara's gaze, unflinching. "A mutual willing reclamation of the bond. It has to be both of you, and it has to be honest. Magic doesn't respond to obligation, Commander, only truth." Elara stood in the corridor a long time after Thessaly left, arms wrapped around herself, feeling the weight of every version of this choice she'd rehearsed in her head over 5 years of hatting him cleanly. Draven found her there. "I know what you're thinking," he said quietly. "That doing this proves you never healed at all. That going back to him undoes everything you built without him." He paused, and when he continued his voice was rough but steady. "You don't owe him anything, Elara, not after what he did. But if some part of you still wants this, not out of guilt, not out of duty, but because it's real, then don't let fear of repeating the past be the reason you walk away from it." He managed something close to a smile, sad but genuine. "I'd rather see you happy with him than safe without him." She reached for his hand, held it briefly, said nothing because there was nothing that wouldn't sound insufficient. Outside the den, Myra sat close beside Alistair on the porch steps, both of them bandaged, both of them quiet in the particular way of people who'd survived something together and didn't need words to say so. His hand found hers without either commenting on it. Inside, Elara knelt beside Roan's bed, watching his chest rise and fall in shallow, uneven pulls, his wolf a faint flicker behind closed eyes. "I hated you for 5 years," she said softly, more to herself than to him. "I built a whole life on that hatred, and somewhere in the last 2 weeks it stopped being true, and I don't entirely know what to do with that." Her hands, when she reached for his, were not steady at all, but her voice, when she finally spoke his name, did not shake. Chapter 10, The Reclaiming. "Roan," she said it again, firmer, her palm pressed flat against his fevered chest where his heartbeat stuttered weak and irregular. "I need you to hear me. I'm choosing this, not out of guilt, not out of duty to your pack or mine. I'm choosing it because some part of me never stopped waiting for you to become someone worth choosing, and somehow, impossibly, you did." His eyes opened, glassy but present, fixed on her with the particular intensity of a man surfacing from very deep water. "Elara." "Don't make me say it twice." Her voice cracked on the last word. "I choose you," he said, rough and immediate, no hesitation in it at all. "I should have said it 5 years ago. I'm saying it now with everything I have left." The bond answered before either of them finished speaking, a pull surging between them like a current finally allowed to flow, warm and overwhelming, Roan's back arching off the bed as his wolf rose fully to the surface for the first time in years, amber eyes clear and steady rather than flickering and lost. Elara felt the answering pull rush through her own chest, 5 years of careful distance dissolving into something raw and undeniable. The claiming mark bloomed dark at her collarbone as he pressed his mouth there, murmuring something against her skin that wasn't quite words. and she gave one in return along the curve of his shoulder, sealing something neither of them would ever be able to fully explain to anyone who hadn't lived it. He woke stronger within the hour. Color returned, wound already knitting closed at a rate that made Thessaly's eyebrows lift in quiet satisfaction. Before the assembled council liaison days later, Thessaly formalized the new pack structure without ceremony or excess words. Ashwood stands under joint leadership. Elara Voss, co-Alpha and Luna, full authority, not symbolic. She looked pointedly at Roan. A condition set by the commander. Do you accept it? Without hesitation, Roan said, and meant it in a way the old version of him never could have. Vex Dragwayer's forces had already pulled back beyond the border. His ambitions checked, at least for now, the cost of his failed invasion too steep to press further. Draven accepted command of a new Accord outpost 3 days later, shaking Elara's hand with genuine warmth rather than lingering regret. "Go be happy, Commander," he said. "You've earned it." Myra and Alistair stood together at the edge of the celebration that night, her shoulder against his arm, something easy and new blooming quietly between them. Elara stood at the gate at dusk, Roan beside her, the chipped wolf's head pillar catching the last orange light. Not survivors of what had broken them anymore. Something steadier than that. "Equals," she said. "Equals," he agreed, and took her hand like a man who finally understood what he'd almost lost.